All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Um, as I know Josh is on a tight timeline too, and want to make sure there's plenty of time and interest. So I'm really excited to have Josh come here and talk to all of you. Describing his sneaker sale, StockX as kind of the gateway drug for so many entrepreneurs, I think even in the room. Um, a couple of quick themes, also, like not themes, but a couple of quick points I'll make um, that take away, if nothing else. I think there's a lot of things you'll take away from, but just from my own interaction. And by the way, for those who don't know me, I'm the director at CreateX. Uh, been working for about 5 years. I was a former VC, and Josh and I first were in business school together and graduated in 2005 from Emory. Out of that class, there are a lot of really cool, actually successful people who came out of it. One of the themes I want you to take out is that when you're in rooms like this, you never know where your classmates are going to end up. At Georgia
I think
Tech,
that was a shot that he didn't think I was going to end up here. That's all good. It's all right. I was in the back of the room sleeping, so
I
it's
wouldn't
fine.
think I was going to be in front of a room talking either. So it started with me first, the doubts. But it's like a lot of my friends from undergrad, a lot of my friends from business school. It's awesome to see. Get to know everyone around you. It's fun, 20 years later to see what people are doing. You'll be amazed, and you never know who's going to do what. Some of the people I got really stupid with back then are doing really awesome things. And then we met again when I was a VC and Josh's first company, which I don't know if you have on the
I do.
book somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make sure to weave that in that you guys did not fund that company.
Yes. So by the way, I didn't fund Mike Cohn's company, who's another mutual friend who we were just talking about Andy portfolios, the companies that we didn't invest in that ended up being blockbuster. Although this one, I think it was a good thing.
Yeah, it was a good thing for you.
All in all, the worst thing we could have done was try to save you at that time, because who knows what would have happened with.
Gotta have a couple failures first, so yeah.
But the point of that is more as you are building startups and things happen, don't think of it as the end of the world, right? Things are going to move on from it. So I'm going to stop talking because I think it's less interesting of me talking and more about Josh. I'm going to let him introduce and talk about his journey, and super excited to have him here. So please welcome him.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I know this was short notice. We decided to do this just last week or so. So thank you all for coming. And in fact, we were talking about 20 minutes ago, and he was telling me a little bit more about the program, a little bit more about all of you guys. And I actually decided to switch up and change the presentation that I was going to give, that I'd actually prepared, to give a different presentation that I haven't given in a while, so this will be a little rusty, but I think it's going to be much more relevant to this group and maybe a lot more fun. You guys probably know, where do I have to point this thing? Hold on, this might not be on. There you go. I need to point back here. All right, so you guys probably know of StockX or know me from StockX, and for sure that is, well, that's a good story, and there's a lot of great things that happened from that. After StockX, I created a company called Fanatics Collectibles. Fanatics Collectibles is the trading card business at Fanatics. This business was bigger, faster, crazier by every metric. StockX went from 0 to $1 billion in 3 years. At the end of 1 year, we raised money at a $10 billion valuation at Fanatics Collectibles. And that's basically the end of this part of the presentation. A lot of this stuff, frankly, you can Google and you can read a lot of interesting stories about all that. That's the fun stuff. This is a chart of my life. The x-axis is time. The y-axis is success. Any measure of success you could possibly imagine, personal, company, personal net worth, whatever it is. And as you can see, most of it is one step forward, one step back, just trying to keep your head above water, just trying to move forward and make a little bit of success. And then two pretty extreme outliers at the end, obviously those being StockX and Fanatics Collectibles. And we are going to talk about all the stuff up until the end. There's a lot of different ways to look at the many different startups and projects and things that you create. One of them is going to be through talk about it as launch videos, but the idea of how you bring a company into existence. And by the way, sometimes for a slide, you just need to write launch videos on the slide, and that's the whole slide. There's a couple of videos also. It's good to just have some videos so you guys can break up from having to me talk for a second. All right, so here's the first video. Has anyone seen that video before? At least a couple hands. So that was the launch video for StockX. Obviously, I guess we are still talking about StockX for a little bit. We created that a couple months after we launched the business. This was a tweet from what's that? TechCrunch. Best intro video since Dollar Shave Club. Pretty good company to be in. This video won all sorts of awards. It was a pretty big deal. It was also pretty good that because we had access to my partner in the business was Dan Gilbert. We had access to a lot of talent from on the video side to create that business and create that video. I'll go all the way back to another launch video that I like. This is Blue Ribbon Sports, which is Nike. And this is Phil Knight. This is a form letter that he wrote in June of 1965, to try to sell sneakers to track coaches. It's a little hard to read, so I'm going to bring up parts of it. I'm going to read parts of it to you. So it says, "Dear Coach, next fall, we are a cross-country team be wearing the best shoe possible. It will only if it's outfitted in Tiger, the best brand of flats in the world. Each model sells for $7.95. Tiger is not only better, it's less expensive. As one runner said, the only people who will be left wearing German shoes will either be uninformed or idiots." First of all, note, as one runner said, like Phil Knight's a runner, right? He could have said that. This is a pretty good line. And then he goes on, he talks some more about it, and then he ends the letter by saying, "You are no longer uninformed." Philip H. Knight. It's pretty badass, right? Okay, that was Nike. They didn't have YouTube for videos in 1965, but that's a pretty good way to kick off that company. Okay. So very quickly, as fast as I can, to go through some of the background. So I went to Emory as an undergraduate. I was a BBA. I was a JD MBA, where he and I met. I met my wife in law school. I met Adam, who's my partner in many of my other companies, as an undergrad. So apparently everyone's in the room here today. Tomorrow I'm going over to speak there as well, which is nice. I grew up in Philadelphia, came down here for Atlanta, was here for 15 years. And when I graduated college in 1999, as a BBA, all my classmates were going to investment banks and consulting and all that sort of stuff that BBAs might go to. And I went to work for a company called Nationwide Warehouse, which was a low-end furniture store where most of the business was sold on layaway. And I worked there for about a year. I took an indefinite leave of absence. I moved to Barcelona. I didn't know anyone. I got off the plane, didn't speak Spanish, found out they spoke Catalan, and I just lived there for about a year. I came back, went back to Nationwide Warehouse. The company went through bankruptcy, laid off most of their staff. And I am a naive 23-year-old, and they call me in. They explain that I'm being laid off as well. And at that moment, they explained unemployment to me. And I said, so I get $300 a week for the next 6 months for doing nothing? And they're like, yeah, that's unemployment. I was like, sweet, sign me up. So I go home and party for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. And we finally came to, and a friend of mine who actually happens to be in the room said, hey, you know that business that you're always talking about starting, now would be a good time to start that. So the first startup that I ever created was partly a function that the job I was working at went through bankruptcy and laid off everyone. And we started a company called My Home Computer Expert. And this was our launch video, this trifold flyer. We started this business in 2001. And we made this flyer. This was Geek Squad before Geek Squad. We would drive around to people's houses. We would put this in people's mailboxes. We lived up in the Vinings. I lived in an apartment complex up at 75 in West Paces. And we'd drive around and put this in people's mailboxes. We quickly found out that's illegal, by the way. It's a federal offense. You can't put things in mailboxes without a stamp. So then we would tape it to people's mailboxes. And we got in all sorts of trouble because people were pissed at us. So then we would rubber band it to people's mailboxes. I swear to God, Adam would drive and I would hang out the front window and I would rubber band it to people. And finally, we decided that maybe there was a better way to market the company than people's mailboxes. But like that was the business, right? We were just trying to get people. And the way it worked was we would hire Georgia Tech grad students, computer science grad students, who would come and they would do the work. So our job was to get the customers. And then it was extremely easy work. And it actually ended up being very profitable for the consultants more than anyone else. We charged $88 an hour, and I think we gave the consultant $60 an hour. So as a part-time job, and most of it was going into like little old ladies' houses, and she thought the computer was broken, but it really just wasn't plugged in. I mean, like that was the level of work that was being done, is 2001. So that's the first startup, and that's the first launch video. This was the big win. We got ourselves an article on the front page of the Northside Neighbor. That is my partner, Chris Morris, who we met. He was a Georgia Tech grad student at the time and became partners. And that was one of the customers there, Jim Davis. So anyway, that was a big win. It got us like 6 extra customers being on the front page of the newspaper, right? So then we changed the branding. We decided, how can we grow this business? And so we wanted to really lean into the fact that we have all these Georgia Tech students that are our technicians. I mean, we were so, you guys, could you imagine how overqualified you would be to go and fix people's computers? That was the business. So we said, all right, we rebranded. We named the company Tech Experts. And then we had to market and we had to figure out how do we get more customers. So we made a commercial. That's what they called launch videos in 2003. Those were called commercials. So this is a commercial that we made. Hold your ears, it's the sound's off. Hey, Adam. My wife's the one laughing loudest. Not quite the same as the video with Wale and Hassan Minaj. That was an actor there at the end. I wrote both of those videos. I wrote the StockX one and the TechX. I don't know why we had to say computer needs twice in the last sentence there. I don't know if that got us any customers. Yeah. We had a friend's father was in advertising, right, and convinced us to do the commercial. We hired that actor, but then we didn't really have money to. It's not like we were running it on like prime time. It was running like, yeah. But like this is there was no internet. There was internet, but this is 2003, right? Like we're just 2002. We're trying to figure out by any way how do you grow a business? How do you get customers? Like this is it. So anyway, I shut down the company, or when I went back to grad school as a JD MBA at Emory. How does this work? I went back to JD MBA at Emory. I met my wife in law school. I worked as a lawyer for almost a full year at Alston Bird. And the whole time that I was working as a lawyer, I was working on my next startup. We graduated in December of 2007, December 2006. So all of 2007, I'm working on a tech company, a startup on the side while I'm working as a bankruptcy attorney at one of the biggest law firms in the world. And so we launched Servinity. Servinity is the company that Rahul was just talking about. This was a service to help connect bars and restaurants with their staff. We started working on this at the end of 2006, and all through 2007, I raised $200,000 from friends and family. I mean, true friends and family. Like my grandfather was the biggest check. No one gave it. My grandfather was $20,000. Everyone else was $5,000 most. We raised $160,000, mainly to pay my salary, but we ran the business out of my basement. My wife was okay with us turning our basement into the office, but we were building a real technology product. The problem was, in retrospect, that this is clearly an app, right? How do you connect a restaurant to their staff, particularly where you have a staff? You know, restaurant's not like another job where everyone's all in the same office, right? There might be 10 people working today, but there's 60 people that work at the restaurant. So how do you connect with it? Clearly, it's an app. There were no apps in 2006 and 2007, right? The iPhone comes out in 2007. So we had this very clunky, first of all, we didn't know how to create software either, but we had this extremely clunky process where you would, on the website, you could send messages to someone's phone and you could text them through the website. So summer of 2008, we're now getting ready to launch a product. We have restaurateurs on our advisory board. We've done all the things that you do. We were a part of ATDC and sort of super networked within the Georgia Tech and Atlanta entrepreneur scene at the time. But we needed now some money to actually launch this business. And so summer of 2008, we were pitching everyone in town, including Rahul. They said no. But we found a small angel round we put together, and it was going to be like a $300,000 total round. One person was putting in $100,000, and his part was locked, and we were good, and we were getting towards the end of the summer and trying to pull the rest of it together. And then September of 2008 happens, and the whole world falls apart. Most of you guys are probably too young to have lived through any of that, but you can read about it in encyclopedias and shit. Whole world falls apart, and so does our little deal. Actually, the angel who had pledged $100,000 called. He came over to the house actually and was like, "Hey, I just lost 90% of my net worth. I can't do this deal." He wrote me a personal check for $10,000. He's like, but the business went away. At the end of the year, I laid myself off first. I was the only one that took any salary. And I specifically remember calling every single one of those investors, all the friends and family investors from that first round, and explaining to them that company's being shut down, your money is gone, it is not coming back. I remember exactly where I was in the house. I remember exactly what the day looked like. I remember, sitting there and having to go through that list of each and every person. But that's part of the process, right? That's part of the process of being an entrepreneur and starting a company. And but then I also didn't have a job. And I didn't know how I was going to pay the mortgage or anything else at that point, because any company we've ever been, you're just running as fast as you're running, and all of a sudden you hit a cliff, and then you have to figure it out. I don't think you realize how much you're in this presentation. Adam's never seen this. So what happened was, Adam had been working at Home Depot at the time, and said, there's a small company based in McDonough, Georgia, which is a plastics manufacturing company. Anyway, there's a small company based in McDonough, Georgia, with plastic. They could really use someone like you. They're small, but they're growing. They have a Home Depot contract. And the owner was this Israeli ex-Mossad guy, this sort of like Hulk of a personality. And I needed a job. And so I take a job at somewhere I never thought I'd be. So I'm driving 45 minutes every day down to McDonough, Georgia, to pay the bills, to have money to be able to live. And even though it's never somewhere I thought I would be, on paper, it was perfect. It's a small business that has real revenue, that didn't have a lot of management. And I have this opportunity to come in, work directly with the CEO to grow this business. So after about a week, I'm like, oh, this is actually a really perfect place for me to take a beat, take a salary, learn how to run a company. The problem was that what happens at a manufacturing plant in McDonough, Georgia, in the middle of nowhere, is exactly what you think happens in a plastics plant in the middle of nowhere, which is that none of the employees were legal. There was no payroll taxes. There was no any taxes. And it was a pretty shady place all in all. And so I very quickly had to get out of there and basically just leave as fast as I could. That's the short version of that story. Yeah. But the point of this is, right, that now I graduate grad school, top my class in law school. I go to one of the most prestigious law firms in the world, making 10x what I'd ever made in my life. Basically being as important as you can be at that point in my life across any social circle, to start a startup that completely fails, where I lose all my friends and family money. And then I try to take a job in the worst job market of my life. And I find myself in the middle of a criminal enterprise. And I basically have to leave in the middle of the fall from grace was so extreme. It happened so fast. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea how, I can't start a company at that point. I have no money, right? Fortunately, my wife was also a lawyer, and so we at least could pay the bills. But no idea what I was going to do at that point. All I wanted was just a job, right? Just to be able to have some sort of comfort and not feel like, that my career was going to be worthless. Fortunately, Raul, you set this up so well. I get a call from a friend of mine who worked at IBM, Jeremiah Gibber, who is in our business school class, and says, hey, I heard you shut down your startup. He missed this whole window at the plastics company because it happened so fast, right? So I heard you shut down your startup. You should come work with me at IBM. And the initial reaction, sort of still thinking of myself as an entrepreneur, was like, oh, hey, I'm a startup guy. I can never come work at IBM. My company had 4 people. IBM has 400,000. Like, no, thank you. On the outside. On the inside, thank fucking God. And so I go through a series of meetings, and I meet some people, and he was working for IBM's internal strategy consulting group. So I took a meeting, I took a job interview, and I get hired. But we have to leave Atlanta. So I'd been in Atlanta for 15 years. I thought this was going to be my home. I thought we were going to live here forever. We had a house in Grant Park. We thought that was where we were going to live. But it's 2009, 2010. You need a job, and I get a job offer to go work at one of the biggest companies in a really nice salary. So we moved to New York City. I'm now working at IBM. I'm now making 6 figures again. I'm now sort of back up in feel good about myself. But if you are really a startup person, if you are really an entrepreneur, then what happens is you go work at a big company at IBM. It doesn't take long for you to start looking for shit to do on the side. And so for me, I wasn't there less than a year before I ran into this company called Turntable.fm. And I know you guys are probably all too young, but has anyone heard of Turntable.fm? They're not raising their hands, don't worry. Okay. This is like summer of 2010. So summer of 2010, this is also pre-streaming, pre-Spotify. And the way Turntable worked was it was a music sharing chat room, basically. So you'd be in this room, you'd be into this club, right? And you could be a DJ, you could be up top sharing songs, or you could be in the room listening to songs. And I cannot overstate how big of a deal Turntable was in the startup space, in the music space, in the VC world. Like, this was such a big deal. It had this moment in time in 2010. It was, front page of Wired, South by Southwest, the biggest parties. I mean, it was a huge deal. And I happened to just stumble upon it as a user like a week after it launched. And I was obsessed. I was obsessed as a user and as somebody. I mean, at this point, my whole startup life was focused just basically reading TechCrunch, right? Just like, or Twitter, or following these people and hoping that I can maybe somehow get back into this world. So I become obsessed, and I start to do some research and figure out who the founders are. And I find the founders. There's two guys. There's one business guy, one tech guy. And the business is based in New York City, and I'm based in New York City. And so I use all of my resources, all my connections at business school, through everything, to just get an intro to this guy. And I couldn't even get a warm intro. I basically just got his email address from somebody, which shows you kind of what people thought of me at that time. Like, here's the email address, good luck. And I started emailing them. And this guy's name is Seth Goldstein. And Seth was a Silicon Valley OG. I mean, his Twitter handle is Seth. And he'd had a couple really big startups before Turntable. And so the fact that he was the co-founder of Turntable was as much a story as everything else in terms of revolutionizing music and everything else that was going on. So this is the guy I got to find. And this is the guy I got to get in touch with and try to. So I started emailing him. And I sent a lot of emails, or relatively a lot of emails, and he finally replies. What's the next one? Okay, so sorry, let me close that real quick. Okay, so he finally replies to an email. This is the email he replies to. I'm gonna read the most cringeworthy parts of it because it's pretty fucking bad. Okay, all right, here we go. All right, Seth, I know your silence is a reflection of having greater priorities. I'm not a desperate job seeker, nor am I a deluded faux entrepreneur. What? Okay. We don't know each other, but at least on paper, you're the boss I'm looking for. I like to talk about creating a position which doesn't exist. Every business owner's fucking favorite thing, right? Right. While at the same time creating a mentorship relationship. So great. So now you want to find money that doesn't exist and my time. Awesome. Okay. But somehow this is July 11th. It was a Hotmail or Gmail. So he finally replies something like I appreciate the hustle, and he agrees to take a meeting with me. And I'm just like, I'm beside myself. I'm just so happy. This is like going on like your first date or something, or not like our first date. Our first date was different. Okay, so he says the Turntable headquarters is in New York. He's based in Silicon Valley. He says, I'm going to be in town on XY date. Come meet me at Turntable headquarters at this day and time. And it was like noon or 1 o'clock. So obviously, like, I cancel whatever IBM meetings I'm supposed to be at. And I get to the office building, and the front door's open, and I see him coming down the stairs. And I know what he looks like. He doesn't know what I look like. So I'm like, Seth. And he's like, Jason? I'm like, Josh, but yeah. And he's like, all right, walk with me. So it's at this point I realized that we don't really have a meeting. He's basically just walking from one meeting to the next in New York City on a nice sunny day, and has basically agreed to let me like walk with him. It's fine, right? I'll take whatever I can get. So we're walking and making small talk, and I'm telling him about me and my background and, you know, whatever I can tell him. And he asked me something along the lines of, like, what are you great at? Or what's your superpower? Or what, you know, something like that. And I say something along the lines of problem solving. And we're walking in a sunny day and we have sunglasses on, and he stops and he turns to me, and he takes down his glasses and he goes, bullshit. Everything's problem solving. Everybody has to solve problems. What are you really good at? And I was like, I blacked out the rest of I genuinely have no idea what I said the rest of that walk. But it was such a gut punch that I'll never forget that feeling. By the way, this was the walk. So we were walking from their office at 36 East 12th to a restaurant right by Google's headquarters, where he was going to meet people from Google for lunch. Remember, Turntable, hottest startup on the planet right now. So whatever I managed to say for the rest of that meeting, it was enough that by the time we get to this restaurant, he likes me enough that he says, hey, you know what? He's like, just sit down and act as if. And I'm like, okay. So we sit down and there's two guys from Google across the table, and I don't really know what they do. They all said titles. And it's just me and Seth. There's no one else from his team there. And again, Turntable, hottest startup on the planet. Everybody's talking about it. And the basics of this meeting were, these two guys were trying to convince Seth to use more Google products. Now, I've since started 2 multi-billion-dollar companies, and I still have no idea what the fuck ClickWords or AdWords, well, I don't know what that shit is. Other people do that. But that's what the meeting was about. It was about those sort of things. And I just sat there and tried to like throw in a funny line every now and then. I knew Turntable, right? I knew that business so well. I knew the community so well. And it was a great meeting. I mean, like, it was just the four of us. At one point, Seth goes to the bathroom, and these guys are asking me all these other questions. And at this point, I'm like, shit, this guy better get back from the bathroom. So anyway, it was a really good meeting. It was fun. You know, I felt like I was part of this company. I mean, these guys were just kissing his ass the whole time, right? You know, he was the most important CEO in the whole VC world at the time. And I was there with him, right? They thought, and by the way, he didn't say that he just met me, right? We sit down and he goes, hey, this is Josh. And that was it. I'm glad he didn't say this is Jason, right? I'm like, hey, this is Josh. And we sit down. So these guys think I'm part of it. It was awesome. So anyway, so the meeting ends, the Google guys leave. And Seth's like, look, this was fun. I like you. But there's not really a job at Turntable. I can't really create a job for you. I don't really know what you want here. And I was like, look, I have some ideas. Let me just stay in touch with you? And he's like, okay. And so I created a number of businesses on the side related to Turntable. So I created this company called shopturntable.fm. Now, Turntable is all about these avatars. The more DJ points you got, the better your avatars could be, and there was sort of a status symbol. And so I created, using a print-on-demand services for T-shirts, hats, hoodies, cups, whatever, where you could get your own avatars, and it's print-on-demand. So it's just marketing to the community. And we didn't have a license. There was no business deal, but Seth knew I was doing this. It was good for the community. I was super active within the Turntable community. At one point, one of his co-founders actually sort of reached out to me and in like a fake cease and desist. And then I had to like tell Seth, I'm like, hey, he's like, no, it's fine. I know Josh, it's fine. Like, there was no legal relationship. We didn't make any money. I sold 2 T-shirts a week, and like one of them was to my brother. There was no business, but it just allowed me to stay close to Seth, to Turntable, to the business. We created 2 other businesses. Are they on here? No, we created 2 other businesses related to Turntable. One was like a calendar of when people were coming on. But anyway, just allowed me to stay close to this guy who, in my mind, was already my mentor, who I already looked up to. And I just wanted to stay close to this company. And I had all these ideas about, you know, how I could leave IBM to work for Turntable, or how I could turn these into more permanent to businesses. I just wanted to leave IBM. I just wanted to get back into the startup world. So it's like the beginning of 2012, and you know, Seth lived in San Francisco, and whenever he'd come in town, I'd try to find time to talk to him. And so, you know, I know he's coming to town. I say, hey, can we meet whenever? He says, listen, I don't really have much time, but I have a meeting with the record labels in Midtown at this time, and then I have to go to the airport. Why don't you grab a cab, pick me up at the record label, and we'll ride to JFK together, and we can talk then. So, I think a lot of people might have thought this is weird, right? To like get a cab and pick. I immediately recognized what this was, right? This is great. I get 45 minutes uninterrupted in a car with this guy who I'm trying to spend. Great. Like hopefully get stuck in traffic, This is also in 2011, 2012, there's a lot less to do on your phone. I also had a couple days advance notice. So I'm like, all right, this is going to be the pitch. This is going to be the time I have him uninterrupted in a cab right next to each other, right? There's no Uber. We were in a yellow cab. And so like, I'm going to put together this pitch of like exactly how I'm going to leave IBM and come work for him. And so I create a PowerPoint presentation, and it's got these two critical paths. One is like, I take these side businesses that I've started, and with a little bit of funding from Turntable, we can turn them into like different divisions of Turntable, and I can run them. But if he can't fund that, then what I'll do is I will still work at IBM, but I'll move into the Turntable offices, and I'll really work for him, and I'll let IBM, like, have this whole thing worked out. And it's all on a PowerPoint deck that I'm planning to pull out in the cab and pitch to him. So I go pick him up, we start heading to JFK, and we make some small talk, and I'm nervous, and he can kind of sense something's weird. And I start to say, hey, Seth, I want to show you something. I start to like pull out my laptop, and he knew exactly what, and he's like, Josh, he's like, you don't need to pull out your laptop. He says, he knows that I'm where I'm going to, right? That I want him to hire me. And, he says, Josh, I can't hire you. You are unhireable. And my heart just dropped. I mean, to the middle of my stomach, this whole time, I thought that I was endearing myself to this guy, that I was proving myself, that I thought I was developing this great relationship with this guy who I thought was my mentor. And then for him to say that I'm unhireable, I'm like, holy shit, like, what have I, like, how much, like, what am I missing that this is what he thinks of me? I mean, I couldn't talk. I thought I was gonna cry if I started talking. And he says, Josh, you are unhireable. You are a founder. I can't hire you for business. You have to start your own company. And I went from I couldn't talk because I thought I was going to cry to I couldn't talk because I was so like overwhelmed with pride. Like he called me a founder. Like that's all I really wanted. I wanted him to see that I could go back and do that the failures from before were just part of the process. And I forget what the rest of the conversation was, but it was great. And we drop him off at JFK and pay for the cab. And I remember sitting in the cab, staring out the window at the river, whatever river that is. And I'd never been so motivated in my life. And I still worked at IBM, and I had no idea what business I was going to start. But I was like, okay. I was like, fuck yeah. I was like, I got like we're going to do something. I didn't know what it was. And this is the end of 2011 is all that was happening. And I was super fortunate that in February of 2012, just a couple months after this moment, this shoe released. Anyone know what the shoe is besides you two? Okay. So this shoe is called the Nike Galaxy Foamposite. The Nike Air Foamposite is one of these like OG Nike shoes. And in February 2012, Nike had a release. It was around NBA All-Star Weekend. That was based in Orlando, Florida, and it was astronaut, space themed. And they have this like space pattern on this shoe. And the shoe doesn't look like much, but for any of you who aren't aware, this was at the time maybe the biggest release in all of sneaker history. It was just the biggest thing you could possibly imagine. And everybody wanted it, and everybody was trying to figure out how to get it. And in the beginning of 2012 also coincided with Nike and other brands starting to figure out how to use social media to promote their products and manage drops. And so there was a lot of nonsense leading up to it. One guy famously offered to trade his car for a pair of car for Galaxy Foamposite. I mean, this is a real Craigslist post. this is 2012. This is before StockX, this is before Go, before any of this. And like I said, it was the biggest thing. Everyone was trying to figure out how to do it. And so Nike tweets at a certain time, they tweet that wristbands will be available for the Galaxy phone at this time at 21 Mercer, which is Nike's store in Soho. And so I'm on a call with IBM, and I hang up the call, and I get in a cab, and I go down there to try to get in line, and there's already thousands of people in line. But I still get in line because I had to. The whole sneaker world was there. Everyone was trying to get a pair. And I stood in line that day for hours, and the line didn't move, and obviously I never got a pair. But just sitting there and seeing the energy and seeing that this was the biggest sneaker release in history, and this is like the chaos, the craziness, that it was just clear that there was something here. I didn't know what it was, but there was some business, there was something going on in this space that as a consumer, I've collected sneakers all my life, but I never looked into sneakers as an opportunity to create a business. I had almost intentionally avoided looking at sneakers because I thought it was like just an excuse to play with sneakers. But now we're at this time where social media is changing, Instagram completely changed sneakers. And I didn't know what the business was, but I knew that I was going to start looking here. There is how much time we have, by the way? I've been talking for a while. 5:50? Okay. All right, that's good. What's the name of that band? The Eagles. The Eagles. Okay. Anyone know the Eagles? You guys are all young. Okay, so the Eagles are the most successful rock band in history. Thank you. There's a really good Eagles documentary where Glenn Frey, who's lead singer of the Eagles, is talking about how when he was early as a rock star, he really wanted to be a rock star. He really wanted to write songs, but he didn't know how to. And he lived in an apartment below Jackson Browne, who was already a rock star. And he says he would listen, Jackson Browne would wake up, put on a tea kettle at 9 a.m., go to the piano, write 4 chords, go back, get more tea, write 4 chords, and back and forth and all day. And Glenn Frey says, oh, I get it. Inspiration is not a bolt of lightning, it's hard work, right? It's one step at a time. It's grinding it out. And that idea of you don't figure out the whole thing all at once. And so I just knew I wanted to be in sneakers. And so I just started talking to people, and I just started trying to create ideas and seeing how they work. And so the first business idea was this company that we called QuickStrike.me. QuickStrike was this idea of an exclusive sneaker club, kind of like a membership club. Like, I don't know if you guys remember Shoe Dazzle. Shoe Dazzle was a Kim Kardashian fronted shoe membership club where for $39 a month, they would send you a pair of shoes. This is like 2010. So same idea. And I actually was in a bowling league with Big Boy from Outkast when I was in law school. So I figure I need some sort of celebrity and somebody who can help me get access to shoes. So I figure out how to get in touch with Big Boy. I figure out how to get I'm living in New York. I call up the guy that runs a bowling league. I come down to Atlanta. I get myself on the team bowling against Big Boy on the same week that Speaker Box and The Love Below came out. So it's this huge party. Everyone's there. And I pitch him on being my business partner in the sneaker business. And he says, yeah, that's awesome. Why don't you come back to the studio after bowling? I was like, sweet. So I go back to the studio. You can't see anything. It's just smoke from here to the back of the room. And I'm pitching him the whole idea. The next day, he puts me in touch with a manager. The next day, I get on the phone with the manager. Big really loves the idea. He loves to be a part of it. He needs 80% of the business. Click. Okay. So that one didn't work out. Then I created Campless. This is kind of where the story starts to end. What's left here? Okay. So there were 4, 5, 6 other sneaker-related businesses that I tried. They were all around the space of getting access to the shoes that everybody wanted, right? That moment at 21 Mercer, everyone wants the Galaxy phones, the idea of how do you get access to the expensive shoes. The problem was that's what everybody wanted to do. So I'm working at IBM, And I worked for not the CMO, but whoever the guy who was report to the CMO is, the second CMO. And this is 2012. And all businesses are figuring out how to use analytics at the time. And I don't know anything about data. I don't know anything. I mean, I basically used Excel spreadsheets to like keep track of like how much money I owed people. Like I didn't know how to use anything. But I very quickly, because I was now a consultant, I very quickly went from, I don't know anything about data to now I'm an expert, because you get thrown in the deep end. And my first task at IBM was building this huge Excel model that took like 8 months to build. And it was fun and it was interesting, you know, the logic of it. And through that process, I started thinking about sneaker data. And at the time, eBay was the only sneaker, it was the biggest sneaker marketplace. It's where all sneakers were sold. And I'll spare you all the details, but the short version is that we created what is essentially the Kelley Blue Book for sneakers, right? It's all we did was scrape eBay for what are sneakers worth, and we created a price guide. And then we had to figure out how to promote it, how to get people to use it. But the sneaker community was small. And so a couple people on Twitter followed us, then a couple more and a couple more. But the real question was, how do I turn this into a business? How do I leave IBM? Now, I'm still working at IBM this whole time. And I talked to everybody in the sneaker industry: Nike, eBay, Foot Locker, Complex, Flight Club, you name it. But there was never really an opportunity. There was never really a good fit. No one was interested in buying it. No one was interested in funding this thing. There was no money. We didn't make any money. All we did was scrape eBay for the prices. Then we created a blog. It was kind of like Freakonomics for sneakers, where we talk about the data. And then the Friday before Easter of 2015, so the next slide is the Friday before Easter of 2015, I get a random email from two guys I've never heard of. And they say, we work with Dan Gilbert, really interested in what you're doing. Can we talk? Dan's the owner of Cleveland Cavaliers and Quicken Loans and pretty much the entire city of Detroit. But Dan's got no ties to sneakers. But sure, you take any call. No, I've talked to everybody at this point. But I get on the phone with these guys, and it's like word for word the exact same conversation I had 1,000 times. I didn't think anything of it. And the next day, they email me back and they say, we definitely want to do this business. We definitely want to work with you. We'd like to fly you to Cleveland to go to a game and meet Dan. Well, first half of the same was like, whatever. Everybody says they're going to do shit, right? The second half, I'm like, absolutely, you can fly me. I'm a huge NBA fan, you know? These guys, like, at short notice, can you come on Easter Sunday? It's like, I'm Jewish, absolutely. Let's make this thing happen. So the real thing here was that Patricia was 39 weeks pregnant with our second kid. I think this story probably goes a whole lot different if it's our first kid, but it's our second kid. So the way it worked was I was supposed to fly in Sunday morning. Game was a 3 p.m. game on Easter Sunday, Cavs Bulls, and I was flying in the morning, go to the game, and fly right back home that night. So you go there, we make small talk during the game. Then after the game, we go back in this private room, sort of owner's room near the locker room. And it's me and Dan and his two guys. We do all the background of me and Campless and IBM and Austin Bird and all the stuff. And then I get to the point to sort of pitch him on Campless and what I think you can do with this business. This is the same pitch that I've given to everyone else, to Nike, to eBay, to Foot Locker. And it was very simple. There were only 3 things on this piece of paper, right? So the first was a price guide. That's what Campless was. This was a price guide for sneakers. Okay. The second is this idea of portfolios, of collections, that if we knew the value of one pair of sneakers, we could very easily look at someone's entire sneaker portfolio, their entire sneaker collection, the same way you look at a stock portfolio. A super easy and obvious application of sneaker data. And then the logic was, well, if you understand asset pricing, if you understand portfolio construction, then perhaps you can create an actual stock market for sneakers. And that was the idea. It was a pie in the sky idea. I'm not a developer. There's no way I could have built this. But it's just kind of what I thought made sense with the data. And I pitched it to everybody. And everybody said, oh, that's pretty cool. But what we want to do is we want to use your data this way, in X, Y, and Z in our business. And fair enough. I didn't think Nike or eBay was going to change their whole business and build a stock market with me. But I share it with Dan and his two guys, and they look at me with pure shock. And it doesn't really register to me why. And then one of them takes out a piece of paper and goes, yeah, we have one of those, that is exactly what we want to build, a stock market for sneakers. I was like, oh. So the crazy backstory of this company is there was maybe one other person in the whole world trying to do the exact same thing at the exact same time, and it happens to be one of the most successful business people in the world. Like, what the fuck? It's so crazy for so many. Dan's got no ties to sneakers in any way. It's 9 years later, and I literally can't get him to wear sneakers. But he had a 15-year-old son at the time who was super into sneakers, was buying shoes on eBay like every other 15-year-old kid at the time. He saw that. He said, you know what, that's a pretty crappy market leader, eBay. That'd be a perfect place to start a stock market. So Dan goes out and he gets to, and he'd always had this much bigger idea that you could use stock market mechanics to create an alternative marketplace. And so he goes out and he puts together a team to start working on this idea, but none of these guys know anything about sneakers. They get a week or two into it and realize, well, shit, we need a sneaker guy. Who's a sneaker guy who can help us run the sneaker stock market? So they go out, they do some research, they find campus, they find me. Turns out the sneaker guy is also built 4 other startups, and was JD MBA and worked. I mean, it was crazy. Like the serendipity of this whole thing was crazy. But this whole thing is happening. Oh yeah, there's a picture of Dan and his whole ecosystem. But this whole thing is happening in the locker room at the Cavs game on Easter Sunday. So at this point, Dan's like, well, you got to come back to Detroit to meet everyone and see everyone. I said, well, it's Sunday. My week's pretty light at IBM this week. I'm sure I can come whenever. Dan's assistant takes out his phone. He's like, how about like Tuesday or Wednesday? Dan has some time. Dan's like, put that away. Why don't you come back with us on our plane right now? I was like, okay. So I text my wife. I'm like, sorry, not coming home. Hope you don't go into labor. Text IBM, not showing up at work tomorrow. Sorry. So we fly from Cleveland to Detroit, spend all day in, what's next here? Spent all day in Detroit on Monday, touring the businesses, offices, meeting everyone. End of the day, Monday, we come back in Dan's office. He says, listen, we think this is great. We'd really like you to stay another day to keep talking. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Text IBM, not sure what work. Text my wife, please don't fucking kill me. Finally, end of the day, Tuesday, back in Dan's office, he says, listen, we think this is the right fit. We would like to buy campus. We want you to come here and run the company. And they finally let me go home. I get home, it's like 2 a.m. on Tuesday night. Patricia's waiting up for me. I walk in the door, and thank God she hasn't gone into labor. And I say, I think we're moving to Detroit. And she goes, what the hell? I thought you went to Cleveland. So that's the short version and of what was just an absolute extraordinary start to StockX. That was the start. Then we actually had to go build the company and everything that came with it. That just got us off the ground. But because it was Dan, because it was sneakers, because it was this, just the exquisite timing of it. For those of you who know sneakers, I mean, we launched StockX the same month Yeezy launched, right? Like there was so much incredible timing. But because, and the fact that the Cavs won the championship that year, and we would just figure out how we could leverage all those resources. It was just to try to build the business. We didn't know where it was going to go. In the same way that we would try to put flyers in people's mailboxes, or like, same thing. This is one of those. Because we were in Detroit, Eminem was an investor in StockX. And so, if for no other reason than show one more video before we end, this was a function of that world that we got to play in. So. What? I made a video with Eminem? What? Like, that's fucking nuts. And then he put me on his Instagram. This is on his Instagram page, has 800,000 likes. But he was an investor in StockX, and he helped grow. Like, that was just a video we made to promote, one drop that we were doing. And it's true, is like, after this went up, the internet's undefeated, right? The internet did this. That's fine though, I'll take that, right? I'll take that. Like, this is what we got to do. And then after the Cavs championship, the Cavs came to us and said, we are cutting up the championship court and we're creating memorabilia out of it. Do you, StockX, want to be involved? Do you want to do anything with this? And I was like, hell yeah. And so we came up with this idea that we would, with not too much wood, we would create sneaker boxes out of the wood. And then we took that idea to Nike and said, hey, listen, we're making these. Would you consider releasing a shoe with us? And they gave us the first retro for LeBron's line, which was a big deal. We made 23. There were 23 that we released. It was in this box that was made of from the court. I had the first re-release of LeBron. We actually gave an actual Cavs championship ring in the box, not the ones that have diamonds, those the ones that LeBron and Dan get real diamonds. This is like if you worked in like marketing for the Cavs. So this was this extraordinary package that we were able to do at in January of 2017. StockX launched in February 2016. We didn't blow up until the holidays of 2017. So we were still nowhere near anything. When I left StockX at the end of 2020, we were selling 35,000 sneakers a day. At this time, we were selling 50 sneakers a day. I mean, it was just, can't even comprehend. But because of Dan, because of this, we got to do this extraordinary release. And because of all those things, it got picked up by the New York Times and it was on the front page of NewYorkTimes.com for, I don't know, half a day or something like that. And this was the first moment, working with Dan for 2 years, that everyone from my past saw this. Everybody on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and my mom's friends are reaching out to me and everyone from business school. I mean, everyone saw this. And everyone's reposting it and it's a really good feeling, right? This was kind of like a far cry from Best Plastics and shutting down Servinity. And then I saw this on Facebook, which I didn't know that he was going to post. But this is a post from Seth, and I'll read it. It's January 14th, so it's January 2017. It says, so awesome to see this in the New York Times, a testament to the vision and grit of a founder, Josh Luber, who started, pivoted, hustled, moved his family from New York to Detroit, and kept on hustling. Always willing to do what it took and partner with those who could help turn his dream into reality. This is the classic overnight success, 7 years in the making. That was a very nice thing to say. It was a very nice thing to say, and I still keep in touch with Seth, and he has continued to be a friend and a mentor through this whole thing. But StockX didn't blow up until the end of 2017. In 2019, we did the $1 billion round, all the success that came out of it. But that run up, and then this, that was like, okay, like I'm a founder, I'm an entrepreneur, however this works out, we'll figure it out and we'll keep moving. And there's been a lot of success still since then, and we're working on a lot of stuff after, but yeah, that's it. So this is a picture of my daughter about 10 years ago. And I usually, I've been using this for a long time for Q&A. So what's that? Yeah, I was gonna do a different presentation. So anyway, that's the story. I was gonna tell you guys something else, but I thought that was more relevant for this group. So I don't know how much time we left, but I'm happy to take questions for a little bit or not. But anyway, that's Fiona, so yeah.
We'll rebook you for the second presentation coming up.
How you doing? Thank you for this very inspiring story. Almost real tearjerker there, for real. But I would like to say, I'm in a similar situation of like kind of putting a fintech spin to alternative investment and things of that sort. I've been kind of focusing on TV, film, and things of that sort. So when it comes to like you and like the stock market of things, what is that next thing? Because you kind of said on shoes, kind of how do you, and I noticed that in your commercial as well, but like how do you kind of transition from shoes to things and
Yeah, where do you go from there? Yeah. I stepped down as CEO of StockX in the summer of 19 after we did our unicorn round. We brought in a new CEO at the time. This is pre-pandemic. There was a lot of focus on going public and there's a lot of work that needed to be done. And it took me about a year to realize that just because I started the company doesn't mean I can't leave. Um, you know, once you're at a certain size and scale, it's a big business. This isn't, a couple guys in a garage. And I never had control, not from day one. Dan was the majority owner, and that's how it is. And so for me, I had no interest in sitting around to try to run a public company or a public size company, right? Like I'm a founder, and it happened to be that there was an idea that I was very interested in that was a function of a lot of the other things we're doing. And so, like I said, it took a while to realize that, but then it actually ended up being a very organic transition as I wanted to explore a new business. It wasn't right to do within StockX. It happened to be trading cards. And I ended up starting Fanatics Collectibles with Michael Rubin, which is the trading card business. But it's a process because this company was so close to me personally because it was the first truly successful business. But the flip side of that is I started Fanatics Collectibles, and then a year and a half later, I left because from the beginning, I knew that if it got to a certain size and scale, I didn't want to be there. And we knew that from the beginning, and so it was much different. So I think a lot of that it's sort of growth and understanding of what you want to do. I thought I wanted to run a huge company until I'm running a huge company. And it's like, fuck that. Yeah, so.
Yeah. So a lot of the startup culture is about building when you can, while you can. Kind of this startup culture that you have, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and build what I have. It sounds like working at IBM was really useful and helpful for you. Would you recommend that entrepreneurs are kind of that I'm working, but I'm an entrepreneur, secretly on the side?
There's no question that my life would be way different if I hadn't gone to work at IBM. Who knows if I ever would have been in anything related to what I've done. I walked you through a number of different companies I started, but in between every one, I always had a corporate job. And part of that was because I could, and part of that was because as you grow, your risk profile changes. First startup I started, I was single. Second, married with no kids. Third, married with one kid. Fourth, married with two kids. Each time that changes, and so I think a lot of it is personal to figure it out. But I also, I literally think I have this as this is this is the question that everybody asks. That's what it is like. The only question is what advice would you give to somebody? But it's talk to everybody, right? Talk to everybody about everything. This is how you find the business partners, the employees, the investors, that stuff. And being at IBM and being in that network, both from grad school and IBM, just gave me such a broader group of people to talk to about those sort of things, right? But the second part of that is talk to everybody, and then just do something. I hesitate to say just do it and be cliche of Nike, but it's like, what are the things that just move stuff forward? And when I was at IBM, I have the time and freedom to just do these small things that if you were working full-time in a business, maybe, you need to be thinking bigger. So. Good.
Thank you. My question is, what's your favorite pair of sneakers that you own?
That changes a lot, but I'll say the shoe that I have the most of is the Air Jordan 1 Lance Mountain, which is a shoe that is just an Air Jordan 1, but it's white and it has this sort of like very hard leather on it. And I have 7 pairs of those, so I don't know if that's the pair that is my favorite, but that's where I have the most of. So.
It's working. My question was that GOAT launched in 2015, and I've bought sneakers off of both GOAT and StockX, and I was wondering, when you were working on StockX, did you draw any parallels from GOAT at all? And how would you say that StockX is better? Because for me personally, not biased or anything, I've had better purchasing experience on StockX than GOAT. And then a follow-up question to that is, did you have a hand in StockX switching over to apparel and also like more general merchandise? Because I bought a Lego set off of StockX that I couldn't get anywhere else, and I'm like, that's really cool. And I'm like, what motivated StockX to go in that direction?
Yeah, so really good questions, and particularly because GOAT, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically the Uber and Lyft to StockX, right? Resale platform launched about 8 months ahead of us. Not only did they launch in September 15, they got the holiday season of 15, where we didn't launch until February of 16. So they actually had a really nice sort of head start. I mean, much smaller than to where it's at now. And these things have a habit of happening, right? Uber and Lyft, and where you have two businesses that are both starting, and it's good. It creates this ecosystem where you have somebody to measure yourself against. There's a lot of things that we did different from Goat. There's a lot of things that are the same. For those of you guys who know those businesses, I think StockX probably has a stronger brand. But my understanding, because I haven't been at StockX for 4 or 5 years now, is that in terms of sneaker sales, it's really close, right? It's really close. And the reason why is both StockX and Goat have a single product page. If you take anything out of this from a high level sort of marketplace understanding, it's this. eBay is a listing-based market, right? Anybody who wants can go and list whatever they want on eBay. StockX and Goat is a product-based marketplace, which means there's one page for every sneaker, which means that every sale, every buyer, every seller is all coming to one place. That's what creates the efficiency. When we say a stock market of things, when we talk about the stock market mechanics, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, and we use what's called a bid ask to price it, but it all comes down to the single product page. Authentication is just a function of being able to have a single product page. All of that goes there. And so that's why StockX and Goat are the two winners in that space, where a lot of the other businesses, I forget, Kixify, for example, launched at the same time as well. Kixify was basically copying the eBay model, right? And so it was pretty clear of why we were doing that. I don't know why they happen to choose the same model, but that's clearly why they're the two leaders there. And so then the rest of it is, how do you differentiate as a brand? How do you market? All the things that go on there. But we very quickly realized that the business was the model, the single product page model. That's the business. It's not sneakers. It just so happens to be that we started with sneakers. So then the question was, what other products work for that single product page model? Streetwear, apparel. You also want to sell the same things to the same customers, right? We actually launched watches and handbags first, before we launched Supreme, streetwear, collectibles, these other products. But watches and handbags was a different customer. So we had a hard time doing that because we had to market to 2 different customers, really 3. But once we started marketing to the same customer, so then those same products. So Legos is just a collectible, same customer base as sneakers, streetwear, collectibles, et cetera. So that's why Legos, electronics, PlayStation, that sort of stuff is all on there as well. So, but anyway, that's the real business of StockX, is the single product page.
Hey, so about a year ago, I listened to a podcast by Kleiner Perkins. I think Scott Cutler was on it. He's the current CEO of StockX. And in that podcast, he was talking a lot about NFTs and like the future of StockX and like directions it's gonna be going now. Do you know how it's doing like with the NFT route? Because I know NFT is like a kind of funky space right now.
My guess is that was an old podcast.
I think it was December of 23. Yeah.
I'd be surprised if he was talking about NFTs that late. But yeah, I mean, look, I haven't been there in a long time, or I haven't been there in 4 years. But I think everybody was obligated to explore NFTs. Anyone who is in commerce and figuring out, forgetting the branding of NFTs, right? The idea of digital goods will still be relevant at some point. And obviously, if Nike cares about it, then StockX and Goat and those companies are going to have to care about it as well, right? If Nike is going to make digital sneakers, then that's going to be relevant to our business at some point. But like I said, I don't think that's really top of priority right now. Sorry, he keeps passing the mic back there.
Hi, so I run a company called Stride Labs, and we automate engineering design for custom medical braces for the foot. It's not quite the same type of footwear. The thing is, like, we have competitors that are very similar, just like how you had StockX and Goat, and we're both at similar stages as well. So why do you think StockX and Goat both end up being successful, even though your guys are kind of direct competitors?
Yeah, well, like I said, I talked about single product page. That was certainly, a key part of it. But we launched at the same time. You know, a lot of this is just timing. Like I said, we are so fortunate that we launched this business the same month that Yeezy came out, right? So you have this moment in time where, and then Nike is fighting back, and then, you know, 8 months, 10 months later, the 10 comes out, which is, you know, Virgil Abloh and Off-White, and that whole, I mean, the number of shoes and the whole sneaker industry was growing at the same time that StockX and GOAT were growing. So we had the infrastructure, StockX and GOAT both had the infrastructure of a single product page, which made it easy for buyers and sellers to be there. And then the timing of the market itself has changed, right? I gave a TED Talk about sneakers in October of 2015. We launched StockX in February of 2016. You can see on the look of people in the audience, they think it's a joke. They think because I start talking about sneakers, and I think it's going to be like an intro to something that's way more academic or relevant for TED, right? Because sneakers at the time were just so not mainstream. And now, you know, it's such a bigger business and all that. So like I said, a lot of it is just really fortunate timing for us to have started that at that moment in time.
Hi. So when it comes to timing, obviously you've mentioned how it was very important. How did you know when to leave one pursuit, go to another, when to leave StockX, and in general, like when to switch into something new?
I mean, that's a pretty hard question, right? It's extremely personal. It's also very much sort of about reading the room. You know, I've always been a couple steps ahead of the current business in that, you know, what's interesting is not working on the existing business. There's many people that can figure out how to create all the processes and structures and all the things. StockX grew so fast, so quickly. There was so much work to do to just get that company to operate on its own. And that's not what I'm good at, and that's not what's interesting. So for me, it was, you know, sort of thinking ahead and what are the things that you can create in new businesses. Sometimes you can do those within a company, but the bigger the company gets, the less opportunities there are for innovation and new things, you know, within the company. And so at that point, you move on and start the next company. I'm super fortunate that the company that I run right now, StockX, Dan Gilbert, Fanatic Collectibles, Michael Rubin. This company, I don't have a billionaire MBA owner as partner. I get to run this thing myself. There's me plus 11 other people. Almost all of them worked with me at one of the other companies before. They all understand what we're trying to do. I get to work with exactly the people. A business is just people. That's it. Business is just people. And so to be able to work with exactly who I want to work with, like that's the true win of all of this. And yeah, so at this point, you know, there's no more moving on, right? You get to choose your own team.
A couple more questions.
So I have a couple of questions. The first one is, you said you've had a couple of failures already. You've done a couple of startups. What kept you going through all those failures to create new companies? And my second question is, do you own the Nike Air Mags?
I'll answer the second one first. Nike Air Mags are the Back to the Future shoe, for anyone that doesn't know. There's 3 different versions. 2 of them are each 5-figure shoes at least, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 grand. I own the 3rd, which is the Halloween version that sold for $199 at Halloween.com. And the light broke right after that. So no, I don't own the mags. They're just hard to wear, right? They're extremely hard to wear. You look pretty goofy walking down the street wearing those. So I don't. I'm a huge Back to the Future fan, though. I would like those. The other one, you know, what keeps you going? What are you going to do, right? Like, you got to work, you got to pay the bills, you got to do something. And I actually thought that I was done. I went to IBM, I thought I was done, right? I was like, great, I have a job, I'm going to build a nice career here. Like, I'm not going to risk it. And I couldn't help myself but to start finding side projects to work on. So a lot of it is just sort of innate, you know. I think a lot of times, and you know, Rahul and I were talking about a number of the different businesses that you guys are working on. A lot of it is just the things that you are naturally attracted to. It's an interest. It becomes a passion. It becomes a business. That's how these things happen. It just so happens that for me, I ended up turning them into a business and they became successful. But if it didn't, I don't know, whatever the next next side project would be. So, yeah.
Hey, so I feel like with a lot of entrepreneurs in general, especially when they're at the start of their career, they tend to have in the back of their head like this large scale 30-year vision or something they're passionate about. Like Mark Zuckerberg, he's always been passionate about wanting to connect people. That's what drove him to make Face Mash, then the Facebook, and then the rest of his career. Elon Musk was always like wanting to just optimize the future of humanity and consciousness, and that can be interpreted several ways. But at the same time, there's also entrepreneurs who a lot of times they'll just see an opportunity to make a huge difference, but also making a good amount of money, like Mark Cuban has done several times throughout his career. Was there ever any type of like large scale vision or something that drove you that you wanted to do through the startups that you were creating, or were you kind of just jumping from where you saw one opportunity to another and kind of pursuing a venture in that space to try and capitalize?
Ironically, that's kind of what the other talk was about, which we're not going to do. You guys can all go home after this. Not to discredit Zucker or Elon, but sometimes it's easier to say that when you're on the other side of it, right? Of like, do you really have a 30-year vision, or just 30 years later you can look back and be like, oh yeah, I planned this out, right? For sure, up until recently, it's been the latter. It's just very opportunistic. Find a job, find a business, find a project, work on it, see where it can go. And by the way, none of the business I've started ended up where we thought it'd be, right? They all iterate, they all change. You go where the business takes you. Now, having worked in the same industry now for about a decade, call it the hype economy, where you have all these products, sneakers, streetwear, watches, handbags, trading cards, collectible toys, that are all supply and demand driven. They're all collectors, resale marketplace, right? They're all very, very similar. I'm starting to have a perspective on a bigger idea, on a larger vision. But I can say all that is just takes us in one direction. We'll still see where it goes. But now that I've been in the same industry for 10 years, I'm starting to have some of that. But who knows, right? We'll see. Well, it takes us in the direction. We'll see where it goes. So.
Awesome. Let's give Josh a hand.
Thank you all.
Thanks to his wife for enabling him and letting him come in, for joining us. There's so many great insights and themes that Josh talked about, and it's good fodder for me as talking to the students. But it is, as you're looking to get started, we've got opportunities at CreateX to come to some of our events. We have startup launch application coming up. But one big event all of you also should be aware of, that this came on short notice also, is that we have Y Combinator coming to Georgia Tech November 12th. We're going to be doing a big panel. Brad Flora is going to be leading it. They're leading the panel. And in the sign up, I think they also have office hours that they'll pick and choose who they choose office hours for. So that should be an awesome event. For us at CreateX, it is all about just getting started. We want to create as many pathways for you to get started and get as many of these types of wins and losses under your belt while you're still in school. It's a great time to give it a shot. So I think there's so many different themes that you talked about in terms of even just product design that we harp on about, simple onboarding, being able to just show one thing, not try to do so many different things, that doing it with even though a competitor is there, that competitors don't really matter. It's awesome. So let's give one more hand to Josh, and be sure to come to our events coming up. So thanks everyone, and hope to see you at some of these events coming up.